She had lost everything. Her son, her smile, her hope. Emptiness gripped her life in a way no words could describe. But amidst the deepest pain a mother could feel, something began to happen. A silent, almost invisible strength began to grow within her, defying the pain, defying the impossible. How could someone who had lost everything find the strength to move forward? This is the story of a mother who, faced with tragedy, discovered that true strength comes not from absence, but from the courage to begin again. The clock struck 7 a.m. when Maria woke up, just like any other day. The house was quiet, with the soft sound of the wind brushing against the windows and the aroma of freshly brewed coffee filling the air. She walked down the stairs, and in the hallway, she saw Gabriel's smile. He was getting ready for school, his uniform still neat, his backpack thrown over the chair. It was an ordinary morning, but in that moment, Maria had no idea that her world was about to fall apart. Gabriel ran up to her, his smile wide and full of life, and wrapped her in a tight hug. Maria felt the warmth of her son, the strong embrace, the touch of someone who still had so much to offer the world. She kissed him on the forehead, with the same love she always did. "Have a good day, my love. I love you," she said, as always. Gabriel replied with an, "I love you too, Mom," and rushed out the door to catch the bus. Maria never imagined those would be the last words she'd hear from her son, the last time she would embrace him, the last kiss, the last goodbye. Deep down, she knew something was about to happen, but she couldn't predict the tragedy that would strike. A few hours later, the phone rang. It was an unknown number. Maria answered, unaware that the sound of that phone, that strange, muffled voice, would become a nightmare that would echo in her mind forever. The voice on the other end trembled. "Ma'am, this is the school. There's been an accident with your son." "Gabriel." The words dragged on. The pain and helplessness in the school attendant's voice were clear. "Your son didn't survive." The ground seemed to disappear beneath her feet. The air, which once felt fresh and comforting, now became heavy, suffocating. The walls closed in on her, and the world she knew turned into a prison. Everything she loved, everything that made her smile, had been ripped from her hands in a cruel and incomprehensible way. She crumpled to the floor, tears flooding, her face like a raging river. Maria's heart, once full of Gabriel, was now crushed, lost. She couldn't believe what she had just heard. How? How could this happen? How could she lose her son? The thought that she would never again see his smile, never again hear his voice, tore her apart. Each beat of her heart felt like a reminder of what she would never have again. Death, something so abstract and distant to her until that moment, was now standing before her, cruel and undeniable. Gabriel, her son, the boy she loved more than life itself, was gone. And Maria sat there, paralyzed by grief, confusion swirling around her, trying to understand what to do, what to think, what to feel. What was she to do with a pain that seemed endless? How could she continue living when the greatest love of her life had been taken so suddenly? But amid the deepest pain, something began to stir, something Maria wasn't expecting, something she never imagined would happen. The loss, so devastating, was starting to bring about a feeling she hadn't recognized. She didn't know it yet, but from that moment on, her life would take a different path. A journey that, although marked by sorrow, would lead her to unimaginable places. The impact of Gabriel's death was like a storm, destroying everything in its path. She felt like she was adrift in a stormy sea, not knowing where she was or where to go. The days began to drag, a blur of loneliness and sorrow. Every corner of the house reminded her of Gabriel, the empty bed, the storybooks he loved, the toys scattered around the room. Everything seemed to scream his absence. The people around her tried to comfort her, but no words were enough. There was nothing that could ease her pain. Maria felt lost, abandoned, and at the same time, guilty. Should she have done more? Could she have protected Gabriel in some way? These questions haunted her, hammering away in her mind without rest. Guilt is a cruel companion. It never left her, but burrowed deep, like an invisible blade. It was as if Maria was trapped in a maze of memories and emotions that consumed her without offering an escape. But the hardest part was the feeling that time, which once seemed so constant and safe, was now slipping away from her. She no longer knew who to trust, where to find comfort. Her own thoughts were like a whirlwind, a storm without end. The mother she once was, the woman full of dreams and hopes, now seemed like a shadow of herself. And it was in that moment of darkness that Maria began to ask herself, am I capable of moving forward? Is there anything left for me after this? The questions kept coming, one after the other, like a river overflowing. She didn't have the answers, but somehow, she knew she had to keep going. Even without strength, even without knowing how, she had to discover how to live again. The time passed, and Maria began to notice that the little things, the things that once seemed insignificant, started to matter more. She grabbed a broom and began sweeping the floor, not because the place was dirty, but because she needed to give some motion to her body, to regain some control over her life. Sometimes she caught herself smiling as she noticed the shine on the wood she had just scrubbed. It was a strange feeling, almost forgotten, but somehow it was like she was rebuilding herself, not by the grandeur of her actions, but by her persistence in the small things. It was the first sign that she still had something inside her to hold on to. Then something extraordinary happened. On a random afternoon, when the weight of sadness seemed unbearable, Maria received an unexpected visit. Her brother Marcos showed up with a toolbox and a sheepish smile. I thought you might need help fixing the fence outside, he said, unaware that his simple gesture was about to mark a turning point. Maria, still hesitant, agreed. It was small, simple, but at that moment, she felt a spark of energy. It wasn't overwhelming strength, but something more gentle, something that, little by little, was helping her piece herself together. As they worked side by side repairing the fence, without saying much, just listening to the sound of the hammer hitting the wood and the wind in the background, Maria realized her mind was a little lighter. Something was calming inside her, even without a logical reason. It was as if every nail she drove into the wood was breaking the invisible chains that held her down. Every action, though small, was a form of resistance, a defiance against the pain that threatened to swallow her. It wasn't easy, but somehow, she was starting to rise again. The next day, Maria decided to leave the house. Something small, a walk through the nearby park. But to her, it meant so much more. The sunlight was gently hitting her face, and she felt the cool breeze against her skin. There was no laughter, no great words of comfort, but there was something unexpected happening inside her. She felt her legs a bit firmer with each step, her heart a little calmer. The walk was solitary, but she wasn't as alone. Something was changing inside her. That day, she didn't have all the answers. She didn't know where the strength that was sustaining her came from, but Maria knew she was starting to see something different. Maybe the pain would never go away, but she had learned that the real strength wasn't in ignoring the hurt, but in moving forward with it. It didn't need to be grand. It didn't need to be perfect. Every step she took was a victory, and she was learning to celebrate even the smallest of victories. Maria wasn't trying to escape the pain anymore. She had finally realized that true strength wasn't in denying the suffering, but in allowing herself to live, despite it. There was no expectation of perfection, only the acceptance that, even with the scars, she could move forward, with the pain, with the longing, but with a heart still capable of loving and rising again. If you were moved by Maria's journey, if you too believe that even in the greatest losses we can find the strength to begin again, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Don't miss out on the next chapter of Maria's story, as she learns that, even in the darkest times, there is always a way to rise again. The days dragged on. Like endless shadows, they pulled Maria into a place where time seemed to stand still. But the world around her carried on indifferently. The void inside her wasn't just a lack of presence. It was as if the space in her chest had expanded, swallowing everything, anything that could have brought comfort. Her heart, once full of laughter and the sounds of her son, now ached with emptiness, echoing with the silence of his absence. Maria sat at the table every morning, just like before. But the routine was now a cruel repetition without meaning. The coffee she made, the bread she sliced with precision, her eyes searching every corner of the house for a piece of her son that would never return. But there was no joy. There was no taste. There was only an unbearable weight. A weight of longing that seemed to grow with each passing day. She often wondered, could the void she felt ever come to an end? Was it possible to go on living with such loss? The house was silent, but Maria felt that the silence had something oppressive about it. There was no longer the sound of quick footsteps across the hallway, no longer the TV running on. Saturday afternoons, nor the happy shouts of Gabriel calling her to play. The world around her seemed to have become a barren landscape, a blank canvas where no colors existed anymore. Even the wind, which used to feel gentle and comforting, now brought only the sensation of an absent hug, as if it too had forgotten how to comfort her. In Gabriel's room, the bed was still neatly made, his books still stacked on the shelf, the same shelf where he used to keep his toys and his drawings. But now, everything seemed untouched, frozen in time. Maria approached the door to his room, hesitating, and looked inside. The gaze of a mother searching in the emptiness for something to fill the hole, a question for the pain that consumed her soul. But nothing. No answer. Just the echo of memories that, instead of comforting her, tortured her. She slowly entered the room, her steps heavy, as if walking on a field of thorns. Every step seemed like a challenge, every second an eternity. Maria sat on Gabriel's bed, her hands resting in her lap, her eyes fixed on the empty space where he used to sleep. She looked at his scattered toys, his collection of action figures he would never touch again, the teddy bear he used to hug every night before going to bed. His absence seemed to take her by storm, swallowing everything. How could she live without him? How was it possible that she had lost her son? The emptiness Maria felt wasn't just emotional. It was physical. She felt as if the weight of her longing was so great that her back curved, her arms grew weak, and her soul, more than ever, sank into a deep abyss. It was a feeling that something essential had been ripped from her being, and nothing in the world could fill that hole. She tried, in every way, to find solace in something, but nothing seemed enough. Work, friends, moments that used to bring distraction, now passed without leaving any impact, like a fleeting breeze. Everything seemed so small compared to the vastness of the pain she carried. Maria felt lost. A mother without a son. A woman without the reason to wake up every morning. The weight of guilt overshadowed her sadness. She questioned herself. Should I have done more? Could I have protected Gabriel? These questions followed her relentlessly, hammering away in her mind. The guilt was a cruel companion. It never left her, but burrowed deeper, like an invisible blade. It was as if Maria was trapped in a labyrinth of memories and feelings that consumed her, without offering an escape. And the hardest part was the sensation that time, which once seemed so constant and safe, was slipping away from her. She no longer knew who to trust, where to find comfort. Her own thoughts were like a whirlwind, a storm with no end. The mother she once was, the woman full of dreams and hopes, now seemed like a shadow of herself. And it was in that moment of darkness that Maria began to ask herself, am I capable of moving forward? Is there anything left for me after this? The questions came one after another, like a river overflowing. She didn't have the answers, but somehow she knew she had to keep going. Even without strength, even without knowing how, she had to discover how to live again. Time passed, and Maria began to notice that the little things, the things that once seemed insignificant, started to matter more. She grabbed the broom and began sweeping the floor, not because the house was dirty, but because she needed to give some movement to her body, to regain some control over her life. Sometimes she caught herself smiling as she noticed the shine on the wood she had just scrubbed. It was a strange feeling, almost forgotten, but somehow it was like she was rebuilding herself, not by the grandeur of her actions, but by her persistence in the small things. It was the first sign that she still had something inside her to hold on to. If this story resonates with you, if you're also struggling with loss, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Share it with others who may need a reminder that even in the deepest emptiness, there's always room for healing, even if it takes time. Maria sat alone on the couch, the album of photos resting in front of her. The house was silent, but the memories of Gabriel were everywhere. His laughter, his smile, his small voice calling for her. All of it haunted her. She hadn't even opened the album yet, but already the pain was overwhelming. Every memory, every image of her son was like a dagger to her heart. It was as if the joy he once brought was now a curse, a reminder of what she had lost. Her fingers brushed the edge of the photo album, and with a deep breath, she opened it. The first picture was of Gabriel taking his first steps, his little feet unsteady, his hands reaching for her. He had been so full of life, so full of potential. And yet, all that was left now was the emptiness, a space where he should be, but wasn't. Tears welled up in Maria's eyes as she flipped through the pages, each one bringing a new wave of sorrow. His birthday party, with him smiling brightly in front of his cake, his hand raised as if to say, "This is the best day of my life." She could almost hear his voice, almost feel his warmth, but it was only a ghost, fading with each passing moment. Why did this happen? She thought. What did I do wrong? The guilt overwhelmed her, making it harder to breathe. The pages blurred as the tears fell. She couldn't stop. Herself. The pain was too much. The absence of Gabriel was too much. How could something so small, so innocent, be taken away from her so suddenly? How could she, as his mother, not have done more to protect him? How could she live with this crushing sense of loss? Maria slammed the album shut, her breath ragged, her heart pounding in her chest. She couldn't do it anymore. She couldn't keep reliving these moments, these memories that were now her biggest torment. Her mind screamed at her to stop, to just let it go. But the memories of Gabriel were like chains wrapped around her soul. They wouldn't let her go. She was consumed by the thought of him, constantly replaying the moments when he was alive, trying to hold on to something, anything, that could make it feel real again. And yet, amid all the anguish, there was something else. A flicker of recognition, a glimmer of something more. It was his smile. That smile so pure and full of love. It wasn't just a memory. It was a gift. It was something she could carry with her, even if he was gone. Slowly, she began to realize that while the pain was undeniable, the love she had for Gabriel was still alive inside her. He wasn't gone from her heart. The memories didn't have to be just reminders of loss. They could also be reminders of a love that transcended time and space, a love that death couldn't touch. The tears stopped, but the ache in Maria's chest didn't. She reached for the album again, but this time, it wasn't to dwell on the grief. It was to honor him, to remember who he was and what he meant to her. She turned the pages more slowly now, allowing herself to smile through the tears. Her son had been a gift, and while the void of his absence would never fully heal, the love she felt for him, the love that would always live within her, could be her strength. The memories would never stop hurting, but they could also be the bridge to healing. They could be a connection to Gabriel that no amount of pain could erase. She closed the album gently, her hand lingering on the cover. She wasn't ready to let go, but she knew now. She didn't have to. If you too have ever struggled to let go of the ones you've lost, If you've ever felt the weight of memories that bring both pain and love, like this video and subscribe to our channel. We are all walking through grief in different ways, but together, we can find the strength to embrace those memories and the love that lives in them. Maria woke up like she had every other morning since the loss. The alarm went off, but it didn't matter anymore. Her hands, stiff from grief, reached out to silence it, but there was no sense of urgency in her movements. Her life, once so full of purpose, now felt stagnant, like an ocean with no current. She dragged herself out of bed and shuffled into the bathroom, her reflection barely registering. The person staring back at her didn't seem like the woman who had once been so sure, so certain of her place in the world. There was only emptiness in her eyes, a quiet void that had settled deep inside her. As she moved through the motions of the day, something inside Maria began to shift. She could feel the weight of doubt and confusion pressing against her chest, making every breath feel like an effort. She wasn't sure where to turn, or even if she had the strength to keep going. She had always been a woman of faith, but now, every prayer she said seemed hollow. The connection she once felt to something greater, to God, had been lost in the overwhelming fog of grief. If there was a divine plan, why had this happened to her? Why had her son been taken away from her? Maria went to church, hoping that the familiar walls, the quiet prayers, and the comforting rituals might offer some solace. She sat in the back, a place she had always chosen when she needed space to think, to reflect. But today, the church felt different. The stained glass windows that used to fill her with awe now felt distant, cold, like something she couldn't reach. She looked around at the other people, kneeling in prayer, and felt so out of place. Why did they seem at peace when she was drowning in her own grief? Her eyes drifted to the altar, the figure of Christ on the cross, and something inside her twisted. It used to be so simple to believe, so easy to trust, that everything happened for a reason. But now, that faith felt like a distant memory. If God truly existed, why had he allowed this to happen? Why had he allowed her child to die? She needed answers, but no one seemed to have them. She tried to pray, her lips moving, but the words didn't come. Her thoughts were too loud, too scattered, drowning out any sense of connection. She had been taught that faith could move mountains, that God would never abandon her. But now, in the silence of the church, she wondered if she had been wrong all along. She had always believed that good things happened to good people, that faith would protect her, but none of those assurances made sense anymore. The internal battle raged within her. Part of her wanted to cling to the faith she had always known, to find comfort in the idea that Gabriel's death had a higher purpose. But another part of her felt betrayed, angry, and lost. What kind of God would allow a mother to suffer like this? What kind of love would take away the one thing she cherished most? Days passed in a haze. Maria wandered through life, unable to shake the feeling of being adrift. She couldn't speak to anyone about her doubts. How could she explain the depth of her crisis of faith? How could she tell people that, in the midst of her grief, she felt abandoned by the very thing that had once given her strength? In the quiet of her home, Maria's thoughts consumed her. She had always believed in the divine plan, in the promise that everything had a purpose. But how could this tragedy, this loss, be part of any plan? She found herself questioning everything she had ever known, and the uncertainty began to gnaw at her soul. But in the silence, something else started to emerge. It wasn't an answer to her questions. Not yet, but a small voice telling her to keep going, to keep seeking, even if she didn't understand. Maria realized that perhaps faith wasn't something that was just handed to her on a silver platter. Perhaps it was something she had to rediscover, something she had to fight for, even in her pain. She didn't have all the answers, but in her confusion, she knew she couldn't give up. Not yet. Maria left the church that day feeling no more certain than when she had arrived, but there was a faint stirring within her. The road ahead would be long and difficult, but she was starting to understand that faith wasn't about having all the answers. It was about continuing the journey, even when the way seemed dark, even when she didn't know where she was going. If you too have ever questioned your faith in the face of loss, if you've ever felt lost and unsure, like this video and subscribe to our channel. Maria's journey is just beginning, and together, we can discover that even in our darkest moments, the search for meaning and faith can lead us to a deeper understanding of ourselves. The days were blending together, each one seeming like a replica of the last, an endless loop of silence and grief. Maria spent most of her time alone, lost in the sorrow that consumed her, unsure of how to move forward, or if she even could. But there was a shift, a subtle change in the air, as the smallest gestures of support began to reach her, like a faint light trying to break through the darkness. It started with a quiet knock at the door. Maria opened it to find Raquel, her longtime friend, standing there with a bouquet of flowers in her hands and a gentle, knowing smile. Maria didn't speak at first, but when she looked at the flowers, she felt a warmth stir inside her, something she hadn't felt in so long. Raquel didn't offer empty words or try to, fix her pain. Instead, she simply sat with Maria, offering her presence, her quiet companionship. "I know I can't make this go away," Raquel said softly, "but I'm here for you, Maria. Whatever you need." Maria didn't respond, but in that moment she didn't need to. Raquel's silent support was enough. It was the first time in a while that Maria didn't feel completely alone. She didn't have to explain her pain or her doubts, and Raquel didn't push her to. She simply reminded Maria that there were people around her who cared, who would be there when she was ready to reach out. Over the next few weeks, others began to reach out in their own ways. Maria's brother, Marcos, came over one afternoon, bringing with him a simple offer of help. "I thought I'd fix the fence outside. Thought you might want some company." It wasn't much, just a task he could do. But to Maria, it meant everything. She didn't expect him to solve her grief, but his presence, his willingness to step into her world, even in silence, gave her a sense of connection to the world she had been shutting out. Her mother, Dona Teresa, came by often, bringing homemade meals. Most times they didn't talk much, just sat together, with Maria's mother keeping her company in a way that only a mother could. She didn't ask questions, didn't try to force Maria to open up. Instead, she simply sat with her, letting the silence speak for itself. And in that silence, Maria felt a subtle shift. It wasn't a cure, not by any means, but it was a reminder that love could still be felt, even in the quietest moments. The greatest change came when Maria began to realize that the kindness she had received wasn't just a temporary fix. These small acts, Raquel's flowers, Marcos's visit, her mother's silent companionship, began to plant seeds of hope inside her. Hope didn't need to be a grand gesture. It didn't need to come with answers or promises. Hope could simply be the act of showing up, of standing by someone, of saying, "I'm here," even if you can't find your way just yet. One day, Maria walked outside into the warmth of the sun. It wasn't a grand moment of epiphany, but it was the first time in weeks that she felt something resembling peace. The sky, so often gray and heavy, seemed to open up, and Maria felt a quiet sense of connection to the world again. The flowers her friend had brought her, the conversations she'd shared with her family, the small, steady stream of support from those around her, they were the glimmering threads pulling her back toward life. She realized that, even though the pain of losing Gabriel would never leave her, she didn't have to carry it alone. In the midst of the darkest moments, the love of others could create a light, however faint, that guided her through the fog. It wasn't about pushing the pain away, but about allowing herself to feel loved, even when she didn't feel strong enough to give love in return. The hope wasn't fully restored yet, but it had begun to take root in the small, quiet acts of love that had been given to her. And Maria was beginning to understand that even in the deepest darkness, hope could still grow. If you're also struggling to find hope after loss, If you felt the power of small acts of love in the midst of your pain, like this video and subscribe to our channel. Maria's journey is one of healing through connection, and together we can discover that hope often arrives in the smallest, most unexpected ways. The sun was setting, casting an unusual golden light across the room. Maria stood by the window, staring out at the world outside. The sky, once a constant reminder of her loss, now seemed like a distant witness to her pain, offering no answers, no solace. She still felt the weight of grief on her shoulders, the absence of Gabriel pressing against her chest with every breath. But today, something was different. She didn't feel the overwhelming despair that had once consumed her. She wasn't sure why, but for the first time in what seemed like forever, there was a faint sense of peace within her. It wasn't much. It wasn't a grand moment of realization, but more like a tiny ember flickering inside her, hesitant but stubborn. Maria could feel the fragility of that ember. She was scared to let it go out, but she also knew that for the first time in months, she wasn't completely lost. She wasn't as swallowed by the grief. She could still feel the pain, the gnawing ache in her heart, but there was something else too, a quiet, unexplainable strength. The day had begun like any other. She woke up, sluggish, but with the determination to get out of bed. It wasn't a huge victory, but it felt like one. She walked through the house, picking up a few things, making her bed. Simple, small actions that had once seemed meaningless now felt like victories. Each little movement she made, no matter how mundane, became a declaration that she wasn't going to let the sorrow consume her completely. She didn't know where this new sense of strength was coming from, but it was there. Maria found herself making a cup of coffee, something she hadn't had the energy to do in weeks. She sipped it slowly, feeling the warmth spread through her, and for the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to enjoy the small comfort of it. Her mind, though still heavy with thoughts of Gabriel, wasn't clouded by the hopelessness that had once been there. It was as if, little by little, she was reclaiming parts of herself that she had forgotten. Later that afternoon, while walking in the park, she noticed the sound of children playing in the distance. Normally, this would have filled her with sadness, the sound of joy only emphasizing what she no longer had. But today, something was different. She didn't feel that same deep sorrow. Instead, she watched the children with a strange sense of acceptance. Gabriel wouldn't return, but the world was still moving, still filled with moments of joy. It wasn't a betrayal of his memory. It was a realization that life, no matter how painful, still held beauty. She could still find it, even in the most unlikely of places. Maria sat on a bench, watching the kids run around, laughing, and something inside her stirred. She wasn't sure if it was hope, or just the realization that she still had the ability to feel something other than pain, but she knew, in that moment, that she was beginning to find the strength to go on. It wasn't about forgetting Gabriel, about letting go of the pain. It was about learning to carry it in a way that didn't completely define her. She would always carry the love for him, always feel the ache of his absence, but she could learn to live with it. She could learn to move forward, even with the pain. And that somehow felt like a victory. Her journey was far from over, but Maria realized that the strength she needed wasn't something that would come all at once. It would come in fragments, in small victories. Each day, she woke up and faced the world. Each time she moved past the fear of being overwhelmed by her grief, she was reclaiming a part of herself. She didn't need to be whole again. She just needed to keep going. Even if the courage came in pieces, even if it didn't make sense, it was enough to keep her moving. She stood up from the bench, the light from the setting sun casting long shadows around her. For the first time in a while, Maria smiled. It wasn't a big, confident smile. It was small, hesitant, but it was real, and it felt like the beginning of something new. If you've ever felt that fragment of courage in the midst of your own pain, if you found the strength to keep going even when it didn't make sense, like this video and subscribe to our channel. Maria's journey is just beginning, and together, we can find that, even in the smallest moments, there is strength to be found. Maria was alone in her room, the curtains drawn. The only sound was her breathing, muffled by the quiet. The day was slowly fading, and the sky outside, with its golden and purple hues, seemed to have no meaning to her. She sat at the edge of her bed, her hands clasped in her lap, staring ahead. There was something different about her now, something she didn't yet fully understand, but it was there inside her chest, like a silent promise she couldn't ignore. Since Gabriel's death, Maria had been battling with guilt every day. Every memory of Gabriel was followed by the thought, I should have done more. The idea that perhaps, if she had done something differently, been more careful, more present, more attentive, her son would still be here, alive, with her. This was the shadow that never left her, even when people around her tried to comfort her, saying that the loss wasn't her fault, that the world didn't work like that. Maria couldn't escape the feeling that she had failed. She stood in front of the bathroom mirror. The reflection didn't just show a mother who had lost everything. It also reflected someone who felt irreparable, as if the pain was a permanent stain that couldn't be washed away. She didn't recognize herself anymore. The mirror didn't just reflect her physical face. It also reflected the wounded soul of someone who hadn't yet learned how to forgive herself. Why wasn't I better? She murmured to herself, and the pain returned to tighten her chest. What if I had noticed the signs? What if I had done more? These questions haunted her, and the guilt was suffocating, almost unbearable. It was as if she was punishing herself for something beyond her control. How could she live with this weight? Then one afternoon, something shifted. Maria received an unexpected visit from Raquel, her longtime friend. Without words, Raquel sat beside her, and without trying to fix her pain, she simply offered her presence. She didn't offer any well-meaning platitudes or promises that things would get better. She just sat with her, quietly, and then spoke. Softly, Maria, you're not a supermom. You're human, and I know this hurts. But what you're going through is a process, a journey of pain and healing, and there's no right or wrong way to handle it. You did the best you could. And sometimes the best we can do isn't enough to avoid pain, but that doesn't mean you failed. Raquel's words were simple, but they resonated deeply. Maria had never heard anyone speak so honestly about her pain, and for the first time, someone was acknowledging that it was okay to be vulnerable. Maria had been so hard on herself, believing that the pain would go away if only she could do better. But Raquel was telling her that it wasn't about being perfect. It was about accepting that pain was part of the healing process. She didn't have to fix it all in one go. She didn't have to carry the weight of guilt any longer. Raquel continued, her voice calm and compassionate. You think forgiveness is something that happens all at once, but forgiveness is a journey, Maria. It starts when you understand that you need to forgive yourself. Not for you, not just for Gabriel, but for those who love you, and for you. Pain and guilt. They won't disappear immediately, but you can start by taking one step at a time. And start by understanding that yes, you did the best you could, and that's enough. Those words stayed with Maria, echoing in her mind. The best she could do. That was all she could have done. But all along, she had been consumed by the belief that she had to do more, that she had to be better to prevent the suffering. But the suffering was already here, and it was part of the journey. She realized that, while the pain would never leave her, she could begin to let go of the self-blame. She could accept her own humanity. That night, when Maria lay in bed, she felt something different. Not a complete peace, not an instant cure, but something gentle and silent began to settle inside her. She closed her eyes, and for the first time in a long time, allowed herself to feel not just the pain, but also the love. She had loved Gabriel with every fiber of her being, and that love was not something that guilt could erase. She could start to forgive herself for the things she couldn't control, for the things that weren't her fault. And in doing so, she could begin to heal. Maria wasn't healed yet. She still carried the grief, the guilt, the unanswered questions, but she had taken the first step toward forgiving herself. And that was the beginning of her healing journey. Slowly, bit by bit, she was learning that, sometimes, the greatest act of love is to forgive yourself. If you too have struggled with guilt or grief, if you found it hard to forgive yourself in the midst of loss, like this video and subscribe to our channel. Maria's journey toward self-forgiveness is just one of many steps, and together, we can all find the peace we deserve, one step at a time. The sky was clear that day. The sun shone with an intensity that felt almost surreal for the winter, as if the world was preparing Maria for something new, something she couldn't fully understand yet. She walked slowly through the garden of the house, the wind gently brushing her face, but her eyes were fixed on the horizon. There was something different about her now, something she didn't fully comprehend, but it was there in her chest, like a silent promise that she couldn't ignore. The scars of her loss, though still present, no longer controlled her. The pain didn't paralyze her, but it still accompanied her like a shadow. And yet, something inside her was shifting. Maria was starting to understand that there was no way back to what was. The pain was real, but so was her ability to live despite it. She could no longer change the past, but she was beginning to see that, even in the aftermath of tragedy, there was room for something new to grow. That morning, when she got up, Maria felt different. It wasn't a grand epiphany, but there was a softness in her movements, an acceptance that life could still offer something, even if it wasn't what it had been before. She wasn't ready to let go of Gabriel. She wasn't ready to forget the love they had shared, but she was beginning to realize that the future wasn't entirely out of reach. She spent the next few days walking through the house, picking up the pieces, literally and figuratively. Her actions were simple, almost mechanical at first, but each task she completed, cleaning the house, folding Gabriel's clothes, organizing his room, became an act of quiet resistance. She was rebuilding herself, not in the way she once was, but in a new form. Each step she took, no matter how small, was a testament to the strength she had left. One afternoon, while walking through the park, she saw a group of children playing together. Normally, the sight would have made her ache with sorrow, the laughter of children amplifying the absence of her own. But today, something was different. She didn't feel sadness. Instead, she felt a subtle connection to them, to the world she had been trying to shut out. Gabriel was gone, but the world was still moving, still filled with moments of happiness. And for the first time in a long time, Maria realized that she didn't have to hide from the world. She could live in it, even with the pain. And perhaps living was the best way she could honor her son's memory. Maria sat on a bench, watching the children run around, and a quiet realization dawned on her. She was still alive. She could still love. She could still make a difference in the world. Her life had meaning, even if it wasn't the life she had imagined. Her heart, though scarred, still had the capacity for joy. And while the void of Gabriel's absence would never disappear, she understood that it could coexist with the beauty of what was yet to come. The following weeks were filled with small but significant steps. Maria found herself reaching out to others, volunteering at the community center, engaging with those around her in a way she hadn't been able to do before. She wasn't trying to replace what she had lost, but she was discovering that her capacity to love, to give, wasn't gone. It was evolving, just like she was. She was beginning to see that the scars were not a sign of weakness, but a testament to her resilience. Every day she woke up and faced the world, every time she took a step forward, no matter how painful she was, honoring her strength. Maria had learned that healing wasn't about erasing the past, but about carrying it with grace and letting it guide her toward new beginnings. She stood up from the bench, her steps now more confident, more certain. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the park, and for the first time in a long while, Maria felt at peace. The scars were still there, but they no longer defined her. She was learning to live with them, and in that, she found her strength. You've ever struggled to move forward after a loss? If you've ever wondered if you could heal while still holding on to the pain, like this video and subscribe to our channel. Maria's journey shows us that, even with scars, it's possible to begin again, and that healing can be found in accepting both the past and the future. Maria woke up, as she had every day since the loss, with the same weight pressing on her chest. The alarm rang, but it barely mattered anymore. Her hands, stiff with grief, reached out to silence it, but there was no urgency in her movements. Her life, once full of purpose, now felt still, like an ocean with no current. She dragged herself out of bed and walked to the bathroom, her reflection barely registering. The person looking back at her seemed unfamiliar, a stranger even. There was nothing in her eyes except emptiness, a quiet void that had settled deep inside her. She moved through the motions of the day, unsure of how to move forward or if she even could. Her mind was a storm of doubt and confusion. And yet, as each hour passed, Maria did something she hadn't done in a long time. She kept moving. She made a cup of coffee. She did the dishes. She made the bed. These were things she used to do without thinking, but now they felt monumental. Every small action, no matter how insignificant, was a victory in and of itself. It wasn't much, but it was something. The pain, though still overwhelming at times, wasn't enough to stop her anymore. The grief was still there, lurking like a shadow, but she was learning how to face it. Every time she got out of bed, every time she took one more step, it was a reminder that she was still here, still fighting. It wasn't a fight she had asked for, but it was one she had to keep fighting. It was in the small, quiet moments that Maria began to understand something important. It wasn't that the pain would go away. It would always be there in some form. But she could still choose how to move forward, how to live, even with the sorrow. Each day was a battle, not just against the loss, but against the part of her that wanted to shut down, to give up. But Maria kept choosing life. She kept choosing to face the day, even when it felt impossible. One afternoon, while walking through the park, Maria watched the children playing. Normally, the sight would have made her ache with sorrow, the laughter of the kids amplifying her sense of loss. But today, there was a shift. She didn't feel jealousy or sadness. Instead, she felt a quiet understanding. Gabriel wouldn't return, but life, with all its ups and downs, was still moving forward, and she could move with it. It wasn't about forgetting Gabriel, or moving on in the way others might expect. It was about accepting that she could still live, that there was still purpose for her in this world. Every step was a struggle, but it was also a triumph. Maria realized that moving forward wasn't about erasing the pain, but about learning how to live alongside it. The emotional and psychological difficulties, though harsh, didn't have to define her. She was learning to confront them, to face the hard days, and still find meaning in her life. Maria began volunteering at the local community center, offering a little bit of herself to those who needed it. It wasn't a grand gesture, but it was meaningful. She began to see that she didn't have to have everything figured out to make a difference. Sometimes the small things, the quiet acts of kindness, the simple presence in someone else's life, were enough. She didn't have all the answers. She didn't know how the future would unfold. But she was beginning to see that life wasn't about waiting for the pain to disappear. It was about choosing to keep going, to keep moving forward, even in the face of unimaginable loss. The struggle was real, but with each step, she felt herself growing stronger. Maria knew now that every day would be a challenge, but she was starting to believe that she could face them, one by one. She didn't have to be perfect, but she could still live a meaningful life. full of love and purpose. Even with the pain, she could find joy. She could find hope. If you're struggling with emotional difficulties, if you're fighting to find meaning in your life after loss, like this video and subscribe to our channel. Maria's journey shows us that even in the hardest of struggles, there's a way to move forward, step by step. Together, we can face our challenges and keep moving toward a life with purpose. The sky was clear that day. The sun shone with an unusual intensity for winter, as if the world was preparing Maria for something new, something she didn't fully understand yet. She walked slowly through the garden of the house, the wind gently touching her face, but her eyes were fixed on the horizon. There was something different about her now, something she didn't fully understand, but it was there in her chest, like a silent promise she couldn't ignore. The scars from her loss, although still present, no longer controlled her. The pain didn't paralyze her, but it still followed her like a shadow. And yet, something inside her was shifting. Maria was starting to understand that there was no way back to what had been. The pain was real, but so was her ability to live despite it. She could no longer change the past, but she was beginning to realize that, even in the aftermath of tragedy, there was room for something new to grow. That morning, when she woke up, Maria felt different. It wasn't a grand revelation, but there was a softness in her movements, an acceptance that life could still offer something, even if it wasn't what it had been before. She wasn't ready to let go of Gabriel. She wasn't ready to forget the love they had shared, but she was beginning to realize that the future wasn't entirely out of reach. She spent the next few days walking through the house, picking up the pieces, literally and figuratively. Her actions were simple, almost mechanical at first, but each task she completed, cleaning the house, folding Gabriel's clothes, organizing his room, became an act of quiet resistance. She was rebuilding herself, not in the way she once was, but in a new form. Each step she took, no matter how small, was a testament to the strength she had left. One afternoon, while walking in the park, she saw a group of children playing together. Normally, the sight would have made her ache with sorrow, the laughter of children, amplifying the absence of her own. But today, something was different. She didn't feel sadness. Instead, she felt a subtle connection to them, to the world she had been trying to shut out. Gabriel was gone, but the world was still moving, still filled with moments of happiness. And for the first time in a long time, Maria realized that she didn't have to hide from the world. She could live in it, even with the pain, and perhaps living was the best way she could honor her son's memory. Maria sat on a bench, watching the children run around, and a quiet realization dawned on her. She was still alive. She could still love. She could still make a difference in the world. Her life had meaning, even if it wasn't the life she had imagined. Her heart, though scarred, still had the capacity for joy. And while the void of Gabriel's absence would never disappear, she understood that it could coexist with the beauty of what was yet to come. The following weeks were filled with small, but significant steps. Maria found herself reaching out to others, volunteering at the community center, engaging with those around her in a way she hadn't been able to do before. She wasn't trying to replace what she had lost, but she was discovering that her capacity to love, to give, wasn't gone. It was evolving, just like she was. She was beginning to see that the scars were not a sign of weakness, but a testament to her resilience. Every day she woke up and faced the world, every time she took a step forward, no matter how painful, she was honoring her strength. Maria had learned that healing wasn't about erasing the past, but about carrying it with grace and letting it guide her toward new beginnings. She stood up from the bench, her steps now more confident, more certain. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the park, and for the first time in a long while, Maria felt at peace. The scars were still there, but they no longer defined her. She was learning to live with them, and in that, she found her strength. If you've ever struggled to move forward after a loss, If you've ever wondered if you could heal while still holding on to the pain, like this video and subscribe to our channel. Maria's journey shows us that, even with scars, it's possible to begin again, and that healing can be found in accepting both the past and the future,